So, get this. What if one of the most respected guys on Wall Street was secretly living a double life? In public, he's a financial wizard, but in private, he's the mastermind behind a $65 billion lie. This is the wild story of Bernie Madoff's financial mullet, this brilliant, two-faced setup that fooled literally everyone for decades.
$65 billion. Just let that number hang in the air for a second. That is more than the entire economy of some countries. But here's the thing, none of it was real. It was a massive ocean of phantom profits, a total mirage built on decades of trust and one single gigantic lie.
So the big question is, right, how does a lie that big just hide in plain sight for so long? How does one guy fool the most watched financial market on the planet? Well, the answer isn't really about the math or the spreadsheets. It's about the man himself, the man everyone on Wall Street thought they knew. You gotta understand, Bernie Madoff wasn't just some random successful investor. He was Wall Street. We're talking about a former chairman of the NASDAQ, a guy who helped invent modern electronic trading. He wasn't just trusted, people looked up to him. He was seen as this pillar of total, unimpeachable integrity. And that reputation? That was everything. It was his real currency, way more valuable than any stock he could ever trade. Because behind that perfect image was a business that, from the outside, looked like the absolute model of success. The trust he built up over all those years, that was the real foundation of the crime. Okay, so this is where we get to the real genius of his whole operation. I call it the financial mullet, a totally legit, buttoned-up business in the front and a wild, out-of-control party of fraud in the back. And I'm not just being clever. This was literally the physical layout of his office building. Take a look at this. This is basically the blueprint for the entire deception. Madoff's company was literally operating in two completely different realities, on two different floors of the same building. Upstairs, you had the squeaky clean public business, but downstairs, well, that's where the secret engine of the crime was humming away. Now, the upstairs business wasn't just a front. It was 100% real. It was a groundbreaking firm that made markets and helped invent the kind of electronic trading we all take for granted today. It was regulated, it was respected, and it was really profitable. This legitimacy wasn't some flimsy cover, it was an iron shield. It's where all his credibility came from. But all that amazing legitimate work happening upstairs, it was the perfect distraction, because now we're going downstairs to the 17th floor. This was the investment advisory side of the business, which, it turns out, was nothing but a complete and total sham. So what was actually going on down there? It was a classic Ponzi scheme, robbing Peter to pay Paul. You take money from new investors to pay off the old ones, and all the while you're just faking these incredible, steady returns. It's one of the oldest scams in the book. Madoff just dressed it up in layers of prestige and complexity and scaled it to an unbelievable size. And here is the most mind-blowing part of the whole thing. There were no trades. Zero. Not one single stock was ever bought or sold for his investors. All those billions of dollars, they weren't being invested. It was all just a vault of fake numbers where a small, super loyal team would just print fixed statements, creating this massive illusion of wealth completely out of thin air. But, just hiding the numbers was only half the battle. The real secret to how this fraud lasted for so long wasn't financial, it was psychological. Madoff understood this one fundamental human desire better than anyone. That irresistible urge we all have to be on the inside, to be part of the secret club. This quote right here, this is the absolute key to the whole thing. Madoff didn't go out selling his fund. He made people beg to give him their money. He turned an investment opportunity into an exclusive members-only club. Getting in wasn't just a transaction. It was a sign that you'd made it. He completely flipped the whole power dynamic. And this was his 4-step playbook for how he did it. First, create an air of mystery. Second, play hard to get, publicly turn new money away. Third, let insiders spread the word for you. And finally, you grant access. It was masterful. By the time an investor was finally allowed in, they didn't feel like a customer. They felt chosen. And that feeling, well, that's a powerful way to make people ignore their doubts. Of course, an illusion this big has to shatter eventually. And when those walls finally came crashing down, what was the real lesson left in all the wreckage? What does this whole crazy story really teach us about ourselves? Because at the end of the day, this story isn't just about money or greed. It's about psychology. Madoff's fraud worked because he sold something way more addictive than high returns. He sold status. He sold that intoxicating feeling of being special, of being in on the secret. And that feeling is a drug powerful enough to blind almost anyone, no matter how smart they are. And that's really the final unsettling question Madoff's story leaves us with. We all know the saying, if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. But the real question is, how badly do you want to believe? When someone offers you that exclusive key, that desire to believe can become our greatest weakness. And that's a vulnerability that exists far, far beyond Wall Street.